What if the girl everyone ignored was born with a gift the world had been waiting to hear? What if the same dusty streets that witnessed her hunger also held the echo of a voice that could touch millions? In the heart of Davao City, where the air smelled of smoke and sea, a barefoot girl named Althea sang under the dim lights of street lamps. Her songs weren't meant for fame or applause, they were meant for survival. She sang for coins, for bread, for the next day. Yet, there was something divine in her tone, a trembling softness that spoke of hope, pain, and innocence all at once. The world around her was loud and careless. Jeepneys roared, markets buzzed, and people hurried by. But sometimes, when her voice rose above the noise, strangers stopped. For a moment, they forgot their rush. For a moment, they felt. Every night, as she walked home to the small corner she shared with Lola Miriam, Althea carried a single dream, to one day sing on a real stage, before real lights. A dream so fragile it barely survived the weight of reality. Lola Miriam would often hold her hand, whispering, "God listens to dreams whispered in the dark, Anak." And Althea believed. Because believing was all she could afford. Until one rainy evening, when a man with a guitar stopped near her. He didn't walk past. He didn't just listen, he heard. That moment, unnoticed by the world, was where everything began to change. The girl from Davao, who had nothing but her voice, was about to walk a road that would test her soul, break her fears, and prove that dreams, no matter where they're born, are real. In the crowded heart of Davo's public market, Althea lived a life stitched together by survival and small hopes. At 15, she was thinner than her age, her skin kissed by the sun, her hair tied in uneven strands. Yet, her eyes, those deep, brown eyes, carried a quiet fire. They told stories of hunger, yes, but also of dreams she dared not say aloud. Every morning, Althea would wake before dawn to the faint hum of tricycles and the smell of fish being laid out on the stalls. With a tin can in one hand and a voice that could move mountains in the other, she'd start her day, singing for coins along the busy sidewalks of Roxas Avenue. Some days were kind, most were not. When people ignored her, she didn't stop. When rain soaked her cardboard shelter, she didn't cry. Instead, she sang louder, not for attention, but to drown the ache in her chest. Singing was her way of staying alive. Her Lola Miriam, old and frail, waited at their small shack made of tin sheets. She would listen from afar, smiling faintly whenever Althea's voice carried through the wind. To Althea, her grandmother was everything, her audience, her reason, her world. Althea was not bitter about her life, she had learned that sadness only makes hunger heavier. Instead, she found beauty in little things, a piece of bread shared with a stray dog, a stranger's smile, the golden sky at sunset. But beneath her calm strength lived a fear, that life would always remain the same. That she would always be the nameless girl singing on the streets, and her voice would fade with the city noise. Every night, before closing her eyes, she whispered a small prayer to the stars. "Please, just once, let someone truly hear me." And though she didn't know it yet, that prayer had already reached the heart of someone who would soon change her life forever. Life had always tested Althea, but the hardest blows came quietly, not with noise, but with silence. It began one morning when Lola Miriam's cough grew deeper, harsher, echoing through their fragile shack. At first, Althea tried to ignore it, pretending it was nothing. But as days passed, her grandmother's strength began to fade. The woman who once greeted her with warmth now struggled to lift her head. Medicine cost more than songs could earn. Althea sang harder, longer, until her voice cracked under the weight of exhaustion. She stood beneath the scorching sun, her voice trembling, hoping someone, anyone, would notice. But people passed her by, eyes fixed on their phones, their worlds too full to hold space for her pain. Each night, she returned home with coins that clinked like reminders of her failure. She'd kneel beside her grandmother and place the coins gently in a small cup, whispering, "Soon, Lola. I'll earn enough soon." But inside, she knew hope was slipping away. The sound of the waves near the port became her companion. Sometimes, she'd sit there, hugging her knees, watching ships leave, wondering how it felt to go somewhere new, somewhere where people didn't look through her. One evening, when Lola's breathing slowed, Althea felt a terror she had never known before. She sang softly beside her, a lullaby she remembered from her childhood, the same song that once made her grandmother smile. But this time, the silence that followed broke her heart. That night, the girl from Davao lost the only person who ever believed in her. For days, Althea wandered the streets with no destination. Her song stopped. Her eyes dimmed. The world she once sang to now felt colder, emptier. She questioned everything, her faith, her dreams, even her own worth. In a city that never noticed her living, no one noticed her grieving. But fate has its way of finding those who are nearly broken, because sometimes, when a dream dies, destiny begins to listen. But beneath her calm strength lived a fear, that life would always remain the same. That she would always be the nameless girl singing on the streets, and her voice would fade with the city noise. Every night, before closing her eyes, she whispered a small prayer to the stars. Please, just once, let someone truly hear me. And though she didn't know it yet, that prayer had already reached the heart of someone who would soon change her life forever. Days turned into weeks, and Althea's voice, once the sound of her soul, had fallen silent. She wandered the streets like a ghost, clutching the small pendant her grandmother had left behind. Hunger became her companion, loneliness, her shadow. Then came the night that changed everything. It was raining again, the kind of heavy downpour that made the whole city shiver. Althea stood under a broken streetlight near the Davao market, watching the world blur through raindrops. The streets emptied, yet she stayed. Something inside her whispered, "Sing again." At first, her voice was weak, trembling like the rain. But as she closed her eyes, memories of her grandmother flooded in, her soft laughter, her faith, her words about dreams whispered in the dark. The pain in her heart turned into strength, and her song grew louder, fuller, carried by the storm. That's when a man stopped nearby, Ethan Cruz, a local musician who volunteered at a small community center. He had been playing at a nearby cafe when he heard the faint echo of her voice rising through the rain. It wasn't perfect, it was raw, cracked, real. The kind of voice that told a story before words even began. Ethan stood there, drenched, frozen by what he was hearing. It wasn't just talent, it was truth. When the song ended, Althea didn't notice him. She simply bowed her head, ready to walk away like she always did. But this time, someone followed her, not out of pity, but out of belief. In the following days, Ethan searched for her across Davao until he found her again, sitting near the pier, silent as the sea. That day, he offered her something she never expected, a chance. A chance to sing, not for coins, but for a dream. For the first time in her life, Althea felt something awaken inside her. It wasn't hope. Not yet. It was something stronger, the sense that maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't over. The days that followed were not easy. Ethan had arranged for Althea to join small singing workshops at the community center, but stepping into that bright, echoing room terrified her. The walls felt too clean, too polished, nothing like the streets she knew. The other singers wore confidence like a crown, while she stood there barefoot, clutching her pendant as if it could make her invisible. Her first performance inside those walls was shaky. Her voice trembled, her hands shook, and when she saw the crowd whispering, old fears flooded back. She ran out before the song could end, her tears mixing with the rain once again. But Ethan didn't give up. He found her outside, sitting under a tree, and quietly placed his guitar beside her. No words were needed. He simply strummed the melody of the song she sang that stormy night, the song that had found her when she was lost. Slowly, Althea began to hum again. And that's when she understood something her grandmother once said, faith doesn't grow in comfort, it blooms in struggle. So she kept returning. Day after day. Voice trembling, heart unsure, but stronger than before. She practiced until her throat ached, learned to hold the mic like it was a friend, and started to believe that maybe her pain had meaning. Each note she sang was a conversation with her past, every failure, every night of hunger, every tear for her Lola. It all became part of her sound, a sound too honest to be taught. Slowly, the people who once looked at her with pity began to listen with awe. Even the instructors were moved by the rawness of her soul. She wasn't the loudest or the most trained, but she carried something deeper, truth. Ethan saw it too. He told her one evening, "The world needs to hear what you've been through, not what you've practiced." That night, Althea looked up at the stars, whispering softly, "Lola, I'm learning. I'm not afraid anymore." For the first time, she wasn't singing to survive, she was singing to live. Months passed, and Althea's life began to change in quiet, miraculous ways. Her name started to spread through the small music circles of Davao, the street girl with the golden voice. One evening, Ethan entered her name into an international audition, Asia's Got Talent, without telling her. When she found out, fear gripped her heart. She was just a girl from the streets. How could she stand before the world? But when she stepped on that grand stage, under the blinding lights and before judges who had heard thousands of voices, Althea remembered the sound of rain on tin roofs, the scent of salt in the Davao air, and her grandmother's trembling hands. This was no longer about fame, it was about honoring every tear, every song, every prayer whispered in the dark. The music began, soft, haunting. Her voice rose slowly, delicate at first, then powerful and unbreakable. The melody carried her story, a child of the streets who had lost everything but never stopped believing. Each note felt like light breaking through clouds, each word a tribute to her Lola Miriam. The crowd fell silent. Even Simon Cowell, known for his sharpness, leaned forward, eyes wide, not in judgment, but in awe. As the final note echoed across the hall, a hush filled the room, followed by the sound of rising applause, first gentle, then thunderous. Tears streamed down Althea's face. She wasn't just singing anymore, she was becoming the dream her grandmother had always seen. When Simon finally spoke, his voice trembled, that was pure soul. Ethan, watching from backstage, closed his eyes, whispering, "She did it, Lola." As the golden confetti began to fall, Althea looked up, hands pressed to her heart, and smiled through her tears. She wasn't the poor girl from Davao anymore, she was a testament to faith, pain, and perseverance. And in that shining moment, beneath the lights, it felt as though her grandmother was there too, smiling, proud, and whispering from somewhere beyond. "You see, Anak, dreams whispered in the dark do come true." Long after the golden confetti had settled and the applause faded, Althea's story continued to echo far beyond that grand stage. Her performance wasn't remembered only for its beauty, it was remembered for its truth. It reminded the world that greatness doesn't come from wealth or fame, but from the courage to keep believing when no one else does. When Althea returned to Davao, she didn't forget the streets that raised her. She walked the same narrow alleys, this time not with a tin can, but with a purpose. She began singing for children who once stood where she had, barefoot, hungry, invisible. She told them stories of her Lola Miriam, of dreams whispered to the stars, and how even the smallest voice can one day move mountains. The people who once passed her without a glance now looked at her with pride. But for Althea, success was never about the lights or cameras. It was about hearing herself, finally believing that her voice, her pain, and her journey had meaning. Every time she stepped on stage after that, she carried the spirit of her grandmother with her. She would close her eyes, feel the warmth of memory, and sing as if the stars themselves were listening. Her story became a quiet lesson to many, that sometimes, the world's most beautiful miracles rise from its most forgotten corners. That loss can become light, and pain can become power. Life had taken almost everything from her, but it could never take her song. And through that song, she had learned what her grandmother always meant, that dreams aren't meant to be easy, they're meant to be earned, through faith, tears, and love. As the sun set over Davao, Althea stood by the shore, the wind carrying her soft hum into the horizon. Her life was no longer about survival, it was about purpose. Because once upon a time, a poor girl from the streets of Davao proved to the world, and to herself, that dreams whispered in the dark can indeed shine in the light. Sunrise.